This is Seth Fleishman with World History by a Jew. I'm back today to do the Epic of Gilgamesh with you. Now, you would probably say that Epic of Gilgamesh has already been done on Digital Hammurabi, so why am I doing it? Well, quite honestly, Megan and Dr. Josh have done very scholarly versions of Epic of Gilgamesh, studying it. My children wanted me to do the version of Epic of Gilgamesh I did for them, so we can do the whole story all in one contained video. For this, I'm going to use the same book that I did when I told them the story. So this is a wonderful children's version of the Epic of Gilgamesh. It's written by Yuan Li, illustrated by Marco Lorenzetti. It was first published in Italy in 2011, English version 2014 by Pushkin. So I highly recommend this if you want to be able to tell the story to your kids. The story is told in a way that's kid friendly, and the pictures are gorgeous. Now, the Epic of Gilgamesh, which I'm not going to get into too much with you, but this is like the major blockbuster heroic tale of the Mesopotamian era. This is kind of like Avengers and Star Wars and Harry Potter all combined. And of course, probably the epic tale most people would know as being an ancient epic tale of heroism would be the Trojan War, or perhaps even Hercules. Both of these were very young compared to Gilgamesh, which probably has them by a good 1,000 years or so. So now let's start with the story itself. So my son Matan is here to show some of the pictures from the book. And I think this will make it a little bit more entertaining, and also to show you why you should buy the book. Now, Gilgamesh was a young tyrannical king of Uruk. He kills young men at their will, and he beats up women as he pleases, and he's just completely out of control. So the people of Uruk cry out to the gods for help, and the gods hear and instruct Anu, the goddess of creation, to make a twin for Gilgamesh, to save the king from his own self-destruction. Anu makes Enkidu, a hairy wild man who lives in the wilderness with the animals. So we have Enkidu in the wilderness, and a trapper sees Enkidu by a watering hole, and he's frightened by this wild-looking man, and he runs home to tell his father. And his father tells the trapper to go see King Gilgamesh, and he tells his son to ask the king to send a temple woman to tame Enkidu. So this temple woman who works in the temple of Ishtar, she was the goddess of love and war. Ishtar would be very comparable to Venus, if you want more of the Roman and Greek gods. So anyway, this woman by the name of Simchat goes to Enkidu, and I know everyone's going to say, no, it's Shamkat. No, I'm saying it's Simchat, because if you know Hebrew and know the story of this temple woman, then the name, in my mind, must be Simchat. So Simchat finds Enkidu, and they become fast friends and spend a week together, really 6 days and 7 nights. Now, there was just a new tablet discovered, if you want to hear the latest news, that it may have actually been 2 weeks. I'm not going to get into that here, so I'm going to follow the more traditional version of the tale. So anyway, Simchat and Enkidu spend a week together, and afterwards, when Enkidu goes back out amongst the animals, he finds that they no longer accept him. And he's very upset by this. So Simchat tells him that maybe he should go back to Uruk, and she tells Enkidu how abusive Gilgamesh is to all of his people, and how he abuses them. And Enkidu decides he's going to go back to Uruk with Simchat to face this king Gilgamesh down. So Enkidu arrives in Uruk, and in the streets of Uruk, he meets up with Gilgamesh, and the two of them get into a big wrestling match in the middle of the street. And although it is a very tough and close match, King Gilgamesh is triumphant. But his encounter with Enkidu changes him, and somehow in this fight they actually become friends out of it. They become great companions, and so over time, now from this wrestling match, they found their best friends. So Gilgamesh decides he wants to go on a mission with his new fast friend, and they decide to go tame the beast of Humbaba, the terrible monster who guards the cedar forest. The cedar forest is Lebanon, just like we know of the cedars of Lebanon. Well, the cedars of Lebanon were real. I'm not going to say the monster Humbaba was, but Gilgamesh challenges Enkidu to join him on this quest. So they head out to the cedar forest and they encounter Humbaba. Now, Humbaba is this right here is the sun god Shamash, which is again very similar to Shemesh. If you know Hebrew, this is him looking over what's going on in the cedar forest from the top of the mountain. And then we're going to flip to the next page, and this is going to be where our story continues, when Gilgamesh faces off with Humbaba in the cedar forest with the help of Enkidu. Now, the two of them by themselves actually would not have defeated Humbaba, but Shamash, the sun god, comes to their aid, and using his powers and really strong winds, he's able to restrain Humbaba, which gives Enkidu and Gilgamesh the edge they need to defeat him. So then they have this victory parade and this big celebration after their win as they arrive back into Uruk. And when Gilgamesh is cleaning himself up and dressing himself up for this big victory parade, he catches the eye of Ishtar. So again, Ishtar is the same goddess whose temple was where Simchat was from. And Ishtar comes and she tells Gilgamesh that she's in love with him and she wants to be with him and promises great riches and rewards in return. But Gilgamesh rejects Ishtar because Ishtar has a very bad reputation. Any of Ishtar's old boyfriends tend to die. And Gilgamesh does not want to be one of those ex-boyfriends who tends to die. So Ishtar does not take being rejected very well, and she's outraged, and so she runs to her father Anu, and she tells him to release the bull of heaven to punish Gilgamesh. So the bull of heaven descends down on Uruk and kills hundreds of men. And Enkidu actually sees what's happening first, and he runs forward this great heroic scene, and he grabs the bull by the horns, quite literally, and holds him down until Gilgamesh arrives with a sword and chops off the bull's head. And Ishtar, after seeing this bull of heaven destroyed, appears and curses the heroes. And this curse now, it leads to the second part of our story. So that night, Enkidu has a dream that the gods are meeting in council, and the gods decide that one of the heroes must die for their behavior, and they choose Enkidu. So Enkidu falls ill and suffers for 12 days before finally dying. And when Enkidu dies, Gilgamesh loses the first true friend he had ever had, and Gilgamesh is shattered, completely crushed. He mourns for days and nights, tears everywhere, and he tears his clothes, and he has now witnessed death. It's the first time death has really touched him, and the end result is he's now terrified of his own mortality, and so he seeks to escape it. And how is he going to escape it? Well, he's going to go try to find Utnapishtim. So who's Utnapishtim? Well, this is kind of a side story, maybe for another time. I did do a lecture on Utnapishtim, but for now I'm going to do the super Cliff Note version, that he's the one being granted immortality by the gods. He's better known as the Mesopotamian Noah for saving mankind. He's rewarded at the end of the Great Flood with immortality. So he's the one man known as being immortal, and Gilgamesh goes to seek him out to find out how he too could be immortal. He travels to Mount Mashu, this twin-peaked mountain, similar to Har Har in the Bible, and he has and this is like the entrance to the world where the mortals cannot go, and he knows Utnapishtim's on the other side. So there's these two scorpion creatures who are guarding the mountain, and they actually sympathize with them. You think there's going to be a big fight with these scorpion beings, but they actually let him pass. They told him, though, he has to run through this tunnel that lights up both when the sun sets and rises. And if he doesn't get through the tunnel when the sun hits it, either on either side of the tunnel, he'll burn up. So you have this great story where Gilgamesh is running for hours at full speed, at superhuman speed, and he makes it through at just the right time before the sun hits the tunnel and lights it up. Now, when Gilgamesh emerges on the other side, he's in this wondrous paradise. And of course, when you're in this wondrous paradise, what's the first thing that you want to do in this wondrous paradise? That is, you want to go to a tavern. So Gilgamesh goes to this tavern and says, hey, to the tavern owner, I need to find Utnapishtim. And the tavern owner sends Gilgamesh to a boatman named 𒀭Now, 𒀭would remind you very much of the story of the river Styx, because there's this river that the living cannot cross, and you have to have this special boatman ferry you across these waters of death. Like I said, it reminds you very much of Roman mythology, if you're more familiar with that. So anyway, Gilgamesh finds 𒀭's boat, but there's only these statues standing around the boat. And Gilgamesh gets really mad. There's no one there to help him. And he smashes all these statues in frustration. And then after smashing these lifeless statues, 🀭 shows up, and he's very, very displeased. So it turns out that these lifeless statues come to life to ferry the living across this water. So without the statues, there's no one to ferry Gilgamesh across. But for some reason, 🀭 still is willing to help Gilgamesh. He tells him if he fashions 120 logs by hand, chops down 120 trees, takes 120 logs, and use those to push himself across the river in the boat. So, take each log and push, and then that one falls in, and take the next log and push. So it's a lot of work, but it's Gilgamesh, so he does it, and they're able to use this log method to get across the river. Now, when Gilgamesh gets to the other side, he sees an old man, and this old man is, of course, Utnapishtim, the immortal, and Gilgamesh explains that he wishes to attain immortality also. But Utnapishtim tells Gilgamesh that immortality is for the gods alone, and mortals must learn to accept death. So Utnapishtim tells Gilgamesh the story of how he was granted immortality. So this is the Epic of the Super Sage. Come back for that spinoff. And then he asks Gilgamesh what he's done to deserve this gift of immortality. But Utnapishtim then offers a deal. There's a certain test that Gilgamesh has to pass. That is, he's got to stay awake for 7 days. And if he stays awake for 7 days, then Utnapishtim will give him the secret of immortality. Now you got to remember, Gilgamesh has run across the entire Middle East, and he's been up all night, maybe a little bit longer. So as soon as this test starts, Gilgamesh falls asleep. Nonetheless, when he wakes up and realizes he's been asleep 7 days later, he still has the sympathy of Utnapishtim for some reason. So Utnapishtim tells him that while the option of immortality is gone, there is a plant that grants youth, this magical plant at the bottom of the sea that can restore one's youth. So he tells Gilgamesh where it is, and Gilgamesh finds this location and descends into the waters and retrieves the plant. So on his way back, though, to Uruk, Gilgamesh stops to bathe in a spring, because I guess this water was real nasty where the plant was, and he leaves the plant by the side of the water, and a snake appears. So similar to the Garden of Eden, here we have this snake who kind of ruins everything, and he comes and eats the plant while Gilgamesh is bathing and sheds his skin, and then just kind of takes off. So Gilgamesh weeps by the water's edge, knowing that his mission for immortality is now completely failed. But the story's not over. Gilgamesh returns to Uruk, and upon seeing the great city, Gilgamesh finally understands. He finally gets it, Sometimes you may see this is taken as a negative at the ending of Gilgamesh. This is actually very a positive take on it, and that is that Gilgamesh understands immortality is not about living forever. Immortality is this collective memory for being a great king will be his greatest legacy. Doing great deeds that are remembered. This is immortality. This is the lesson we learn from Gilgamesh. And here it is, this king of Uruk from 5,000 or so years ago, we're still talking about today because of his great deeds. And that is immortality.